Grace to you and peace from God who is, who was, and who is to come. Amen. In our gospel reading this morning, Jesus and his gang are probably traveling southbound, heading toward Jerusalem. They attempt to enter a village populated by Samaritans, but they're turned away. And a couple of the disciples want to rain down proverbial fire and brimstone on these Samaritans, which sounds to our 21st century North American ears a little bit like overkill. But for this to make sense, we need to understand who the Samaritans are in a first century Palestine point of view. They're seen as, and no offense to anyone who might have any of these characteristics, the Samaritans are seen as the red-headed, left-handed stepchild to the Israelites. Now, centuries prior, when the children of Abraham had come together and were united as one, they were ruled by kings. When Solomon dies, the kingdom splits into two. The southern, geographically smaller kingdom is called Judah, and it's populated by two of those 12 tribes. The northern, geographically larger kingdom is called Israel, and that has most of the rest of the tribes. However, it's in the geographically smaller kingdom of Judah that has Jerusalem, and therefore the temple of Yahweh, which they see as the true house of God. The northern kingdom of Israel, well, they had to build their own temple. They had to build it in some place other than Jerusalem. That northern kingdom is eventually overrun first by the Assyrians, who are beat out by the Babylonians, who are followed by the Persians, and eventually all of them are overtaken by the Greeks, so that by the time 1st century AD rolls around, the northern kingdom that was known as Israel is now pretty much known by its non-Jewish name, Samaria. All of the inhabitants of the former southern kingdom, which by the 1st century is called Israel. Have I lost you yet? You following? You catching along? Okay. The southern kingdom is now called Israel, or the former southern kingdom is now called Israel. They pretty much look down their noses at their northern cousins. Those northerners, they don't worship in the proper temple, therefore they don't give the right sacrifices. They have the gall to intermarry with non-Jewish people, and they probably have cooties as well. Overly pious Jewish believers would literally cross to the other side of the road if they saw someone that they perceived to be a Samaritan walking down the same street. Samaritans probably had a similar view of the Israelites, but it's not as pronounced. Now, hopefully, though, that explains why the disciples' response to the rejection of the Samaritan village, "Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down and kill them?" They were basing their response on years, decades, centuries even, of built-up animosity, hostility, and pride. They really did not have to dig very deep to come up with their loathing of the Samaritans. So, who are the Samaritans in your life? We all have them, you know, Samaritans. We don't call them that, but all of us have people, individuals, groups, types, with whom we do not get along. Maybe they have a different point of view than we do. Maybe their first language was something other than our first language. Maybe it's their skin pigmentation or their body type or their gender. Maybe it's because they belong to a different political party or have a different view on gun rights, or it's what kind of music they like. Maybe it's their theological persuasion. It could be just about anything. Paul, in his letter to the Galatians, came up with a whole list of things that mess us up. enmities, strife, jealousy, anger, quarrels, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, blah, 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 blah. Sometimes we cross over to the other side of the street to avoid our Samaritans. Sometimes our Samaritans bug us so badly that we wish we could command fire to come down from heaven and consume them. And if you try and tell me that you don't have Samaritans in your life, I will tell you that you're lying to somebody, either to me or to yourself. Because if you are a living, breathing human being, there is at least one person in this world with whom you do not get along. And you probably don't need to dig very deep within yourself to figure out who that is. Because that's part of what it is to be a human. We don't always get along. Humans, being human, can bring us together. Being human can also drive us apart. Our humanness lies close to the surface, which is good, usually. It's that humanness that drives us to have compassion for those in need. It's our humanness that helps us to have varying types of love for our neighbor or coworker, family, or hopefully that special someone. It's also our humanness that gives us our love of pasta or Tex-Mex or good old PA comfort food. It's our humanness that gives us enjoyment of golf or basketball or field hockey. It's our humanness that helps us to decide what we're going to wear in the morning, what color we want to paint the living room walls, whether or not we want a pet in our life, and if we do, is it a cat, dog, a rabbit, a llama? But our humanness also tends to divide us. Our humanness drives us apart. Maybe it's because I don't approve of your hairstyle or lack thereof. Maybe it's because I find your accent difficult to understand. Maybe it's because you live over there and I live over here. Maybe it's just because you're different from me. Each of us have our own Samaritans. You know what's deeper than our humanness, though? Faith. Faith in God, faith in self, faith in others. Faith can bring us together, regardless of all that humanness that would try to divide us. We learn faith, hopefully, from an early age. And even though our humanness is baked into our being from the womb onward, really, faith can override our humanness if we let it. Our faith is buried deep within us in a good way. Still, we need to dig deep to get that faith out. Did you remember what we just heard, what Paul wrote to the Galatians? For you were called to freedom, sisters and brothers, only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for self-indulgence, but through love become slaves to one another. For the whole law is summed up in a single commandment: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. If, however, you bite and devour one another, take care that you are not consumed by one another. I rather like that. I think we can paraphrase Paul into simply, don't devour one another. The thing is to not devour one another, to not command fire to come down from heaven and consume those with whom we do not agree. That goes against our humanness. Because we kind of want to hurt those who we perceive have hurt us. And so we have to dig deep into ourselves, into our faith, in order to find God in us. And when we find God buried deep in ourselves, that's when we find that other list that Paul talked about: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, faithfulness. We have to reach beyond our self-centered reactions when we encounter our own Samaritans. We have to dig down deep and respond to our Samaritans in faith, no matter what they are doing. We have to dig deep into our faith to remember that if we live by the Spirit, let us also be guided by the Spirit. Sisters and brothers, I encourage you, dig deep into your faith and let the Spirit be your guide. Amen.